Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Midweek Wire. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. Thank you for joining us. We are streaming out live on X, Rumble, also YouTube, Facebook Live, BitChute as well, and a few other platforms if I missed any. We're also going out in the audio streams after the program, as usual, on iTunes, Spotify, and a number of other top audio streaming platforms. So if you're listening on the audio streams, we're there as well, as we are with the Sunday Wire after the program. So if you're subscribing there, thank you very much. Look, we've got a pretty explosive topic today. You've probably seen the news about Ukraine's surprise attack, drone attack against the Russian Federation, hitting a number of military installations across the width and breadth of the Russian Federation. And this has caused a lot of problems, not least of all, it's absolutely sabotaged any peace negotiations which were scheduled in Istanbul, but the whole peace process in general is really in disarray at the moment, and the United States is playing aloof. We don't know what happened, and the British are as well, kind of like playing coy about the whole thing. We'll look at who's actually involved with the Ukrainians in this drone attack, and the implications of this are really massive and not altogether good, I think, going forward. Very disturbing. We'll talk about the future of warfare as well as what actually happened. We'll break down some of the technical aspects of this first. To help us with this conversation, I want to bring onto the stage Mats Nilsson. We'll bring him up right now. Mats is joining us from Stockholm, Sweden. He is a legal historian. He's also a geopolitical analyst and a keen follower of European affairs and NATO affairs, especially, Matt, since you are in the big club now. Sweden and Finland are big members of the big club. You're in the NATO club. So as a responsible member of your democratic system, it is incumbent upon people like yourself to make intelligent criticisms and comments regarding what NATO is doing, because it will affect you now as well as anybody. You're on the front line. Firstly, Matt, we'll talk about the actual attack, and we'll bring some of the footage up on screen just to get people familiar with what's happening. Now, this is something that we haven't seen before, not this type of attack. This is the targeting as well. The whole basically gambit of this is something that we haven't quite seen before, and it has huge implications, of course. So we've got some footage from drones. These are Russian long-range nuclear deterrent bombers stationed in one of the target bases. And of course, the claims on the Ukrainian side are that they took out 1/3 of Russia's long-range bombers and 1/3 of its cruise missile capabilities. These claims are dubious and debatable. Dubious at best, and all sorts of claims were made by the Ukrainians. Now, there was damage done, not $7 billion worth of damage, but damage done nonetheless. And so, first of all, Mats, I want to get your take and your reaction to what happened. How would you kind of summarize this from your vantage point?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that it's a bit ironic that the system used by the Ukrainians and by MI6 or all the other usual suspects that were obviously involved in making this happen was a system that was once developed by the Russians. I think it was maybe almost 15 years ago that there was news, a buzz about a new Russian weapons system that hid missiles in shipping containers. And then there was a big discussion about this was a cheap weapon, it was a dangerous weapon, and this Club K, I think it was called, a funny name, was basically discussed as a potential huge threat. And also, I think the Chinese have had a weapon of sorts using the same basic idea. So it was, of course, a huge propaganda victory for Ukraine and its allies, so to speak, that Russia was hit by this system. However, it was once again one of those Pyrrhic victories, because it's been done once, it can't be done again. And yes, it was a frightful loss. I mean, you had, I think, 8 provenly claimed destroyed nuclear bombers. And like I said, the propaganda victory is probably what Ukraine has gained the most of. But it begs the question, where to now? I think about just under an hour ago, President Trump produced information on X, or on Truth Social, which was later posted on X, that he had approximately an hour's discussion with President Putin. And in this message, Donald Trump says that they discussed the attacks on Russia's docked airplanes, and also previous attacks that have been taking place. And what Trump says is that Putin's answer was, and he also emphasized that Putin very strongly said that he will have to respond to the recent attacks on these airfields. So this is obviously something that whoever planned this wanted to happen. They wanted this escalatory violence to commence.
And so we've got some computer rendered, CGI graphics of the operation, and we'll look at the map here, Mats. And I know that actually some of these targets are up in your neck of the woods.
Oh yes.
In the Murmansk region. I mean, and these are heavily contested, sort of, if this is a new Cold War, or a heating up of a Cold War, these are frontline, territories here and borders up in the north, veering on the Arctic, of course, on the Finnish border, and then all the way is into Central Asia as well. And you're talking about Russia's strategic nuclear deterrent here. So just looking at the array of targets here, Mats, is there anything that you can comment on, just looking at the spread of the targets in this attack?
Well, something I can comment on is that what Russia now is, and this is very dangerous because this goes back to the idea of deterrence and the capability of having second strike options. What we're looking at now, if you look at the Murmansk region, you can see that both Norway and Finland are now just basically miles away from the central strategic areas of the Murmansk region and Arctic Fleet, Russian Arctic Fleet. During the Cold War, Norway declined to have permanent NATO troops based in Norway in order not to aggravate tensions between the Warsaw Pact, and NATO. And this is, as we know today, off the table. And Norway has made a deal with NATO to have rotating presence in Norway. So what we had during the Cold War was in essence quite a wide buffer zone between NATO and the center of the Soviet Union, if we like, Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. The situation today is that this buffer zone is gone. So now we're dealing with a Russia who is under attack, who feels that the border between them and the enemy, that is to say NATO, is just miles away. And the first strike option could then happen so fast from, say, Finnish NATO territory or Estonian NATO territory, or, God forbid, Ukrainian NATO territory, that Russia would lose the capability of having a formidable second strike option if things go nuclear. And you need to address this change in strategy, which unfortunately no one in the EU is doing. I mean, NATO has gone above and beyond to show that it's only interested in pushing forward. However, there are no longer any leadership in Europe that have any experience of war. They don't have any experience of the Cold War. And the generations who were the architects of rebuilding Europe after the Second World War are definitely gone. There is perhaps a reminiscence of this, but what we're doing now is we're pushing a nuclear power to a position where it feels threatened in a way that's going to be detrimental to world peace, and I dare say to the possibility of us surviving as a species. You need a buffer zone, and you need to engage in diplomacy in order to rebuild this buffer zone and rebuild trust. Sadly, there is nothing indicating that this will happen.
And you know, the thing that struck me on this, Matt, is, I mean, we're looking at the long range bombers here, or, you know, a computer rendering of them, and the reason that they're displayed out in the open, and this is a nuanced point that's probably lost on a lot of people, especially in, you know, in places like Washington, Brussels, Berlin, and the Baltics, for starters. But because of the START treaty, that's the agreement, the bilateral agreement that the United States and the Soviet Union had, which got grandfathered in with the Russian Federation post-Cold War, that these would be observable for SLR or satellite and surveillance from both sides. And that was part of the, you know, the reciprocal arms control or nuclear agreement to prevent any kind of sudden moves that might cause panic, trigger events, and so forth. So this is one of many agreements that were designed to pin down the potential for danger, like the anti-ballistic missile treaty that's lapsed, the INF treaty, intermediate nuclear forces and missiles, that's lapsed, the Open Skies treaty that's lapsed, and the START treaty. So this attack was very calculated, Mats. This is to me, this seems like a war on the START treaty to knock out one of the last still agreements that's due to be renewed February 2026. So this isn't Ukraine. This is some other actors in the background here. Choice of targets, the significance, how the Russians will react, what kind of a geopolitical upheaval could result in terms of some of these relations between the two great powers. So just your thoughts on the ramifications from a nuclear control perspective.
Well, it's first of all, there is a bit of I'm not totally sure about the START treaty, because I believe in it must have been early 2023 or late 2022. I know that Russia said that it was not, or at least it was postponing participation in one of the consultative committees within the START treaty. And I don't think it's been, there is question if the START treaty actually is in force, or if one of the parties have left due to existing realities. And by that I mean they have not partaken in the obligatory inspections that they have to do during the treaty. If this was due to the pandemic, or if this was something that happened later, I'm not too sure about that. It can actually be. I'm a lawyer. I'm sorry, but the devil is always in the details. So I'm not sure that the START treaty is an argument as per se as such within the framework of the START treaty. It is, however, a break of what you call it, the intentions of the agreement, and obviously any attack made with this kind of candor is something that's going to trigger and especially hinder further agreements, be it on any treaty between the United States and Russia. I am, for obvious reasons, leaving Ukraine and the European Union out of the discussions, because we all know that if this is going to be settled, it needs to be settled between Russia and the United States. Otherwise, nothing is going to happen.
That's a key point. That's what needs to happen first. That's what one of the things I argued on a debate last night with it wasn't a debate, it was more of a discussion, because we were all kind of mostly in agreement. It was Colonel Larry Wilkerson and Ray McGovern, and Danny Haiphong was the host, and we discussed a lot of these issues. And I think there's kind of a broad agreement that, you know, the U.S. and Russia really have to make an agreement that's robust between the two parties, and then that has to be, they have to impress some of these points onto Ukraine. It can't be Ukraine dictating terms about Russia with the U.S. behind it holding a big billy club, or Europe threatening on the sidelines to jump in and, you know, try to get Russia to trigger the Article 5 tripwire, and all hell breaks loose. I mean, because that's the kind of chaotic potential that exists here with all of these actors. And looking at this, Mats, I don't want to sound really, really cynical here, but you know, people say, how did Europe get into so many wars? And I think the answer is pretty self-explanatory. And not to belabor the point, but if we look at some of the people in charge, let's take the NATO Secretary General for a moment. Mark Rutte, he is the newly crowned successor to Jan Stoltenberg, the Norwegian banker. And this is what Rutte has to say. And so we're getting into the very uncomfortable political dimension of all this, which is somewhat clownish, Matt, but it is clownish on one level, but I find it to be frightening on another level, because these people, I suppose, believe some of the things that they're saying, including the Secretary General of NATO, who, of course, has great military experience himself, watching war films, probably. I'm not sure what his experience is, quite frankly, but here's what he said. I know you also commented on this on X, but this is the Secretary General, Mark Rutte, giving us a history lesson, and also telling us, you know, where things are at today in 2025.
NATO is the most powerful defense alliance in world history. It's even more powerful than the Roman Empire. So, and more powerful than the Napoleon Empire. We are the most powerful defense alliance in world history. But a defense alliance needs maintenance and needs investment. And that's exactly why in NATO we have this whole system, the NATO defense planning process, now leading to an agreement on the capability targets. And that means that we will have exact clarity on where are we and where should we be if we want to be able to defend ourselves not only today, but also in 3, 5, 7 years. Listen to the German chief of defense.
Okay, that's about all we can handle there. So NATO is more powerful than the Roman Empire and Napoleon, previous European empires. It seems like a somewhat off-color comment, Matt, perhaps maybe characterized badly. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm no longer surprised that I mean, obviously he's an educated man, but he's not particularly well read, I believe. I mean, it's a very shallow education that he's gone through. And the second thing is, which on a personal level I have to comment on, is the fact that Mark Rutte, he doesn't have any children, and he seems incapable about contemplating those of us who do have children, who actually worry about the next generation's possibility to have any future in this environment which we're right now at. Because for those of them in America listening, Europe has always been kind of a club of squabbling tribes running around using whatever we had in our hands to beat each other up. And I mean, the current incarnation it's once again those nationalistic ones. And we're right back in Europe where we used to be. there is a new elite of globalists trying to kill the serfs, or at least trying to get the working class people out into another war. It's just basically very short-sighted thinking. And the media, they have adapted themselves accordingly. I don't see any media comment on Rutte's speech saying, well, perhaps we should remember how Napoleon's invasion of Russia ended in 1812 in total defeat. There is no mention of this in the newspapers. I mean, democracy in Europe right now means ensuring that the right people get into power, not the people not the politicians that the people voted for, but the people or the politicians that the other politicians on the European level want to see in power. So there's no discussion about a just war anymore, like there used to be. War could be discussed in terms of a just and unjust war, and according to a Catholic tradition. In Europe right now, there seems to be a virtue in promoting war, and the leadership, it doesn't have any education about the effects of a war. So we're up against a problem where our leaders seem to be incapable of understanding what war means. And of course they are incapable of this because they have not lived through a war. However, you can do this by gaining an insight to what war means, mainly by listening to people who have actually been in wars, or by reading books explaining what war is all about. It's not the flags and the drums and the pipes. It's the mud and the gore and the screams of your mother. But that's not an issue right now, because right now it's just an issue of there are Western values. We are the ones promoting liberty. We have to fight against the evil. So it's a very simplistic discussion, once again, between bad and evil. We're right back where we were 1914. Nothing learned, nothing gained. And I don't know what to say. It's a sad state of affairs.
It is. It's a sad state of and a sad indictment on, more broadly, Western civilization, I think. But this is a very dangerous situation that's unfolding here. I think a lot of people are underestimating the risks and the dangers involved, because once the dogs of war are unleashed, it's no telling how events can cascade, and you end up in a place, and history has shown this many times, Matt, as you could probably explain. Other times in history, I think we could even put the First World War in that category for certain, and the Second World War, where events reached a point where things no longer made sense, or they weren't as logical as they appeared to be the previous 6 months. And then you're in a new reality at that point of people guessing, which is what we might call, I guess, power politics, where people are guessing and decisions are made based on power and who has the upper hand. Game theory takes over, and then it just becomes a real powerful, game of chess at that point. Your thoughts on that risk?
Well, it's as it's probably evident, I do read a lot, and one book that comes to mind is it's Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray, the portrait of Dorian Gray. Because what I see now, it's us, it's the EU, it's the West. We're describing ourselves as morally superior of everyone else. But we tend to forget what we have done in Syria, what we have done in Afghanistan, what we're doing in Gaza, what we have done in Iraq, what we did to Libya, how we treated Cuba, and so on. But in the novel, I mean, Dorian Gray he's as hedonistic as NATO is right now. He used to he used to equate his beauty with a kind of spiritual goodness. I'm beautiful, therefore I'm good. And he was given the possibility to have immortality and remain this beautiful individual. However, with the immortality, he became crueler and more evil. And the portrait of him was the only thing that disintegrated and shown how evil he was on the inside. So in a fury, he finally destroys the painting of himself, cuts it with a knife, rather than face the ugly truth of his own evil, and he dies. Which is, it's a quite interesting analog to make, or observation to make, that right now the EU or the Western world, we're the Dorian Gray. We look at ourselves and we see beauty. However, our inner hedonistic evils are so apparent to everyone now that sadly, I think the only way forward for us is to do what Dorian Gray did: destroy the picture of ourselves and rebuild everything from the bottom up. The question is, how far down towards the bottom do we have to go? Does this involve nuclear strikes from any side in the war in Ukraine, or can we dismantle our hedonistic ways and cut the painting without destroying the whole building that the painting is hung in? I don't have the answer to that. Some days I wake up and feel, okay, this might actually work out. And then, you go into X and check last night's news out of Washington, and then you say, oh, never mind, the nukes are going to come flying. I'm not going to say what's happening, because it's just educated guessing at this point.
Well, that analog fable, Oscar Wilde story that you just shared there, it's particularly pertinent to the waning concept of the British Empire and global Britain. Certainly, there's a lot of that level of delusion in the halls of power in Westminster, 100%. And in Brussels, it's something on a different type of a level in Brussels. And in Estonia and places, the Baltic states have just been empowered to a degree that's unnatural. It's like, they've been given injections of steroids and they're in a powerlifting competition. And it's the rhetoric coming out of these small states. So the most hawkish are, relatively small countries that don't pose any serious military challenge to Russia, but through the collective might of NATO, or theoretical collective might of NATO. But at this time, Matt, it's not even that. They're literally NATO's using Ukraine as, their main vehicle to somehow, in their minds, wear down Russia, weaken Russia, deplete Russia. And they have themselves depleted themselves economically through backfire of sanctions and so forth. But to me, this is just in a way, it looks like the last sort of desperate lunge to preserve that portrait that you talked about. But there's still a lot of mileage in it. This could go on for a long time in its current form. Go ahead.
I think it will go on for a long time, because what the West is doing in Ukraine is actually, it just follows the same pattern that it has done for some time now. I mean, almost back to the Vietnam era. It's just that the opposition now, that is a Russia fighting for its existence, or at least Russia feels that it's an existential fight, means that a Western military overreach is going to have unprecedented consequences for NATO. So, I mean, first of all, everything follows the pattern. First, you had the moral framing of the conflict. The West defined the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. It was very simple. It was between freedom, and it was between totalitarian Russia. And of course, Putin was quickly figured as with a Hitler mustache. So that quickly built up a consensus amongst the citizenry in Europe. But of course, it didn't look into the nuances. It didn't look into the complex issue of diplomacy. It didn't look into what was Russia's legitimate Monroe Doctrine. All those risks were just quieted down. What happened after that? Well, then you had the problem with the tactical optimism. Quickly, it became obvious, at least to people like us, that the West underestimated Russian resilience and grossly overestimated NATO's capacity. So once again, the risks were ignored, and you quickly came into this area of strategic shifting points made. First of all, I believe you remember that back in 2022, 2023, there were going to be beach parties in Crimea. Mm-hmm. And all of Ukraine was going to be liberated. And it was just basically a matter of who was going to lead the victory parade, the NATO victory parade through Moscow. Suddenly now NATO is adapting, as they call it, which means that there's actually a discussion about, well, perhaps Crimea won't be part of a peace deal initially. But all this previous talk has made the concept of having a diplomatic solution all the more hard to come by. And then finally, one of the points where we're in right now is that attritional commitment. Right now, NATO is continuing to pump equipment, continuing to bolster attacks like the drone attack a few days ago. They're committing to the cause, and they're saying if we withdraw now, Russia will just continue to Berlin once again, which of course is obvious. I mean, it's hogwash. It's not going to happen, but they need that for domestic political reasons. And the final question is, will this end like, say, Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya, where basically there is a failure, but NATO withdraws and declares victory? This is the problem, and this is where the pattern deviates, because there is no framing of the loss that NATO will suffer. Because once NATO withdraws, there is no going back to point zero. That was when Minsk II was still a legitimate agreement between the West and Russia, or Ukraine and the states, the Donbass areas. Because you can't go back there. Russia has clearly stated, we do not trust Ukraine. We definitely do not trust the West anymore. We will be making a peace deal once our objectives have been made. So now both parties are locked in a position where neither feel that they can withdraw. So I think the people of the EU countries and the NATO countries, the voters, are the ones who need to stand up and say, we want politicians that start to de-escalate. But then you're up against a massive propaganda machine. So I don't think we're going to end up there. I think we will more than likely end up in a continued war setting for at least another 2 years.
Yes, indeed. And you know, it's a good point you brought up about Minsk. You know, and you know, I'm not impressed when I hear the U.S. delegation talking. They're like, "Oh, well, you know, we want a reset of the Istanbul format, and well, you know, the Minsk format that you know they already blew it." It's like when Trump's talking about the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, which he's trying to get back for himself without the P5+1, but. Trump has a lot of plates in the air, you see. He is presiding over this apocalyptic disaster in Gaza, and he is a co-belligerent with the Israelis in that disaster, that humanitarian disaster, the genocide, the Holocaust, however you want to describe it. Plus the Iran negotiations. That's not going particularly well. They keep flip-flopping. Nobody knows from one day to the next where it's going. Israel's also putting pressure on Washington by threatening to attack the Iranians. But here in Ukraine, I think there's a huge problem. I don't think Donald Trump nor any of his team really appreciate or believe or really deeply understand the current playing field. I really don't. And you know, and they say, well, that's not true. They're just play acting, and it's the art of the deal. Based on all the statements I've heard, I just, it's a very shallow. They have a very shallow interpretation of what led to the war, what led to February 2022. And I'm a firm believer of the garbage in, garbage out principle. And of all of your beliefs and assumptions of the Russians, of how this war began, of what's Ukraine's culpability, in what the U.S. culpability is from Maidan, the Maidan coup. If you're parroting rhetoric for, like you said, Matt, for domestic consumption, for domestic survival and intra-NATO consumption, in other words, everyone's feeding off everyone's propaganda, you cannot formulate actual policy. I don't think it's possible to get a deal. I have not heard coming out of the mouths of Trump, Rubio, anybody, Kellogg, anybody that's addressing the reality of the situation and also addressing the clarity in a clear way what the Russian demands are. And the Russian demands, Matt, are the same as they were in December of 2021 when they issued their letter to Anthony Blinken in the U.S. State Department. So it hasn't changed. So, but U.S. is not really talking. They're not describing the situation. So how can you agree on anything with the major counterparty if you're in a kind of another dimension of reality? And I see this as just a terminal failure unless there's an overhaul of personnel. I really don't see it. I don't know your thoughts. I'm blackpilling on this the last couple of weeks. Go ahead, Mats.
It's the thing that worries me, and I'm going to take this into a broader global context right now, because I read what Pete Hegseth was saying when he's over in Asia right now, and there are a few flashpoints in Asia as well, mind you, and it seems that the Trump administration is once again doing what the Obama administration once said it would. It's trying to pivot towards Asia as well and escalate a confrontation with what's basically naked economic warfare and an arms race in that region as well. So just as the United States and NATO have provoked Russia into eventually having to invade Ukraine by continuously encroaching on Russia's border, and what Russia has said they couldn't accept. And they've said that since the 2007 speech in Munich. So it hadn't been a secret. The Trump administration, for all its discussion about bringing peace to the world, is seeking to provoke China into a Taiwanese invasion and bring the island, step by step into this global conflict by stationing American troops, kind of deviating from the one China policy. And Hegseth is right now in, I think it's Singapore. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it's Singapore, where he's boasting about American military capabilities and how the allies in this region needs to buy more research and development from American military industrial companies. And it's once again, it's as if they haven't learned anything. The United States is demanding that NATO drastically boosts military spending to, I think they're going to say it's going to go up to 5% of the GDP. And it's like a bride, all dressed up, but no wedding to go to. It's once again, you're all dressed up, but with no war to fight. Obviously, there's going to be a war to fight, considering the amount of weapons in circulation, because the profits matter most. So we're looking. What Trump is doing is actually aggravating the situation not only in Ukraine, but also in flashpoints in the Middle East and now worryingly in Asia. And there is obviously no way that the West can take on a united Russia and Chinese alliance. So I don't even see an end game. I just see a clown in a suit getting up every morning in the White House and trying to make a deal, which he's obviously incapable of. Now, I'm not saying it would have been any better with Kamala Harris, mind you. I'm just saying that Trump is just as bad as any other option that we had in the last US election.
Yeah, I think he's burned through all the goodwill that he came into office with. That's for sure. And it's legitimate criticism. We're past the 100-day mark, certainly past the 24-hour mark that he promised he would end the conflict. But just going back, considering what this map looks like, what that means to the Russians, and mind you, Mats, 12 months ago, the Ukrainians hit a long early warning radar system all the way in Orsk, by the Kazakhstan border, 1,500 kilometers inland from Ukraine into mainland Russia. And there was another similar strike by Ukraine, and that was right before the so-called peace summit in Switzerland. This attack is right before the Istanbul summit. So it's in addition to this, we also have attacks on bridges. Okay, and so this is going to play huge domestically for Russia and politically for Putin. So he's come out and basically called them terrorist attacks. Some might say that, that those are legitimate military targets technically, but the optics of it, as far as Russia's concerned, they're terrorist attacks. There was a civilian train which was hit, people were killed. So this type of warfare and the Kerch Strait Bridge connecting Crimea to Russia, that was also hit as well. So they're having this sort of cluster of attacks, asymmetric attacks. There's probably more to come. And of course, the Russian response is going to be very harsh on Ukraine. But there's also, the Russian spokesperson has also said that, well, if their revised doctrine, not necessarily nuclear doctrine, but rules of engagement are that if they believe an existential threat is emanating from a NATO source, they reserve the right to neutralize that threat. Now, that brings us into a whole new sort of discussion there, but this has been these asymmetric attacks, Mats, have been going on for 2 years now, and we're just pushing the escalation down the escalation ladder further and further, and the chances of peace, they are talking. That's great. I think this is at least something. The U.S. is talking to Russia, but if the U.S. isn't playing a central role in taking the lead, and this is where I get really critical, Mats, is that J.D. Vance and Trump taking this cop-out position, like, oh well, the Europeans and the Ukrainians, we can't deal with it. We're gonna walk away. If the Russians and the Ukrainians can't agree on this or can't show up at Istanbul, we're just gonna wash our hands of it. The U.S. cannot walk away because if they do, there's a vacuum there, and that vacuum can be filled by some very, let's say, irrational and unstable European interests. Am I going a little too far in that sort of concern, Mats? Your thoughts?
No. I think the most dangerous scenario is if Ukraine crumbles from interior pressure, and then Zelensky is by a palace coup replaced by one of the Azovite hardliners who could probably go no one knows how far in order to provoke Russia, and the EU would, for some odd reason, go along with it, because you have to remember that, I mean, this tradition about having Russia as an enemy, it goes back to basically the 1860s. It's been that long. The British they've basically been in an auto mode of anti-Russian sentiment, passing it on from generation to generation. And I think the European Union believes its own lies. And now we're in a situation with a Ukraine that right now we can still control it, because we have Zelensky in place. There is a structure within Ukraine there is still a center that holds. But this could change very quickly. And there could be any tin pot dictatorish fellow that could pop up in Kiev and go postal in all different kinds of directions, and then there's no saying what might happen. I mean, I think Europe needs to, like I said, needs to be deconstructed in every sphere, politically, financially, and militarily, and it's happening due to the European Union's own stupid political decisions. Because that's the only reason for this cycle of war and violence to end right now. And if this is something that Washington wants, I don't know, but it's definitely something that Washington is going to get. And as for me, being a European citizen living in Sweden, it's going to be painful. But perhaps through that pain, at least my children will be able to have a future.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lack of imagination at the European leadership level and at the United States level. Is both the U.S. and the Europeans need to decide. They need to be able to imagine a world where they're not basically the unipolar hegemon and imposing this collective, subordinates on everybody else and treating anyone like an enemy in this Manichaean framework, which you described earlier in our discussion. And I see headlines like this, Mats: Ukraine's drone triumph opens a window to the future of war. This is not a pretty picture, this type of warfare. And back to there's Zelensky, of course, treated as a hero here, but just going back to the footage or the CGI rendering that we showed earlier, I'll bring that back up on stage. And this might be a segue to a final part of our discussion, but we're talking about a very dangerous future here, because if you look at the British Defense Review, Strategic Defense Review, last week was all about drone swarms. That's not a coincidence. Yes. And it was called the Kill Web, and the Ukrainians called this Operation Spiderweb. So I already see the British fingerprints on this operation. The U.S. intelligence, British engineering and sabotage operations. I do see that as, and it's admitted that they're with the SBU fully integrated into the Ukrainian military intelligence. So, but Matt, this technology has the ability to paralyze governments. And
yes,
if a nuclear power is faced with that type of threat, then we're into a nuclear response discussion. No, there's no doubt about it. You're talking about, assassinations of whole presidents, government people. Look at what Israel's doing in Gaza. You can do something similar with this technology if you're able to do it at scale, okay, and relentlessly. You can paralyze countries and governments, economies. The possibilities are, especially with AI drones. And we're very, very rapidly moving into this space, Mats. Go ahead.
Definitely. And if you combine this with the artificial possibility of making political statements. For example, you can make something look like Zelensky saying something, or you can make it look like Trump said something. I mean, it's in everyone's hands right now, or Putin saying something. And then if you look at what that UK Defence Review said, it said it was going to build the AI powered digital targeting web, as you said, a kill web. And it was going to have a real-time overall battlefield competence across land, air, sea, and space, mind you. And it was also going to have this offensive hacking capabilities of both missiles and enemy drones, and destroying command and communications system. So it will link satellites, it will link jets, it will link drones, it will link electronic warfare, and it will upload this to artificial intelligence. This is the plan. Now, I think if I say the word Skynet, suddenly a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger becomes a documentary, which is not something that I particularly enjoy thinking about. But if we give up this, shall I say, if there is a human aspect to war, you will still have the possibility of there being an opinion that the war should end. Because if soldiers come back without their arms, missing their legs, they are blind, they return home, people can see their suffering. But if war is done by drones behind a computer screen, it's not going to end nicely. We can just make the comparison on X. People are screaming at each other. They're writing things that they would never say if they were sitting down in a pub having a beer with the fellow they disagreed with across the table. They would probably have a discussion. Perhaps it would get heated, but they wouldn't retort to calling each other names. And I don't think they would actually fight each other, because there is something in everyone where it says, let's talk about it first. And then instead of fighting, I think one or the other would leave. But once we automate the fighting, we're heading down a path which is very dark.
Yeah. And I think this is a path that's has a much more rapid acceleration towards nuclear weapons being used as a deterrent against existential threats from this new technology. There's no doubt about it. I've looked at different nuclear simulations from the past, and they don't change once you pass that threshold. The logic of nuclear exchanges and trading cities and all of these crazy apocalyptic scenarios, once you get past that threshold, it defaults into that, and getting up to that threshold, this drone swarming and asymmetric and terrorist attacks using these tech, it brings you up to that threshold very quickly. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think that the scenarios that, if you look at history and you look at the different scenarios of how global nuclear war starts, I think in all the scenarios that were made, and I think there were over 90 of them, not once were they able to step back from the point of the first missile being fired. Once it's fired, it just goes on. It's an automated process. There was nothing. There was not one simulation where you were able to scale back from the brink once that missile or torpedo or whatever it is has been fired and you have gone nuclear, as we can see right now. It's then, so we don't want to end up there.
No, absolutely. And I don't think this conversation's happening at the European level. I really don't believe it's happening, and that worries me.
Because the European leaders are just saying, no. Russia would never contemplate that. Russia, it's just a doom and gloom talk. We don't have to take that into consideration. Yes, you do have to take it into consideration because Russia feels they're facing an existential threat. And then it's all the little scenarios made in NATO headquarters under those lovely SS formed roofs that they have built, the new headquarters in Brussels. All that's off the table. It's, to me, it's interesting. I mean, I lived in Russia, I worked in Russia. I'm not saying I understand the Russians, but I have at least some concept of the way they reason. But there seems to be no concept whatsoever in the halls of the politicians within the NATO countries of how the Russians are reasoning this war. And it's the nuclear doctrine is an active part of the Russian response strategy, and NATO really needs to understand this.
Yeah, no, it is very real, and I also fear, Mats, that there's not enough people alive in the West, literally alive, that really understand or have experience and are well trained, and have the depth and the able to weigh up these types of situations and risks. I don't see them there. I see a lot of political appointees. I see a lot of people that are promoted to their level of incompetence. We see a lot of that going on. And as you said, people are chosen based on what other European leaders, we get the leaders that other European leaders want, rather than people that really probably representing the interests of the people. But we have this one last clip, and we promised, well, we didn't promise, but Lindsey Graham, of course, made his way to Kiev to bask in the glory of this wonderful D-Day operation by Zelensky, and he is growing like never before. And so is Mike Pompeo, by the way. He's also in Odessa at the Security Baltic or Black Sea Security Forum or something like this. So here's Lindsey Graham, and you'll see Mike Pompeo there in the side footage on the side. But this is Lindsey Graham basically talking about what a great position the U.S. and Ukraine are.
President Trump said that Ukraine doesn't have good cards. Well, Russia's much bigger and has a lot more people. I get that. But the world has a lot of cards against Russia. And one of those cards that we have is about to be played in the United States Senate. In America, you have more than one person at the card table. We have three branches of government, and the House and the Senate are poised to act. What would change our mind if Russia came to the table, agreed to a ceasefire, and earnestly... President Trump said that...
So that's not going to happen, Mats. They're not going to agree to a ceasefire without the initial political demands, the neutrality, the no NATO for Ukraine. All that stuff needs to be taken care of. They're not going to have a ceasefire. You've got this delusional character here. I am disappointed. I think it's very weak of Donald Trump to not be able to rein in people like this unless he's happy to have these dogs off the leash running around like Mike Pompeo and Lindsey Graham, because it undermines the negotiation. So does Trump understand this, Mats? Or is this part of the chaos, or is this strategic? What do you think?
I think it's just chaos. It's just chaos right now because Russia understands the concept of war. I mean, if you make war, and this has been the problem for the United States in all wars, basically, since Vietnam and back, or you could argue Korea as well, but you don't make war halfway through. If you make a war halfway, it's your own grave that you're digging. And Russia is going to go all out war if it sees this is needed to end it in a way that will end the existential threat to its country, to Russia. NATO, however, is playing along the lines of a halfway war. It's we can have a little partial war, but the historian in me once again says throughout history, small conflicts started by even smaller states where even smaller so-called statesmen have ruled have more than often dragged the whole continents, or in some cases, dragged the whole world into a major conflict. Now, if you look at Zelensky as one of these small leaders in a small country, he knows that he can never stand up against Russia forever. Zelensky also knows that the only way for him to survive is if he can drag the West into a direct conflict with Moscow. And I think Zelensky realizes he needs to do this sooner rather than later, or otherwise he will be wiped off the board. And that's this small country, Ukraine, with this small leader, Zelensky, is going to, I believe, the most educated guess, drag us into a global conflict. Because the chaos in Washington is such that they are not fit to deal with Russia. And the European Union obviously isn't fit to deal with Russia. So I think the small country of Ukraine will drag the whole world into a big conflict.
Mats, not only is the West or U.S. especially not agreement capable, they're not negotiations capable. They can't even do the negotiations. Forget about the agreement. They can't even conduct negotiations. They really just can't deal with the situation. They can't deal with Russia. They can't deal with the realities of the emerging BRICS political economy globally. They're lost. They really don't know how to proceed forward and do so in a intelligent, in a magnanimous or gracious or responsible way as world powers. The U.S. has certain duties as a UN Security Council power, as a nuclear power. They're shirking those duties. That's what I see with this very weak Trump administration. Arguably weaker than the Biden administration before it's all said and done, and that's saying a lot. That is saying a lot, and is equally as aloof as Trump has become, because he just can't. I don't think he's capable of dealing all the talk, all the bluster. He doesn't have the intellectual fortitude nor the moral and ethical framework I think that's required to be the type of leader that's required to diffuse three major flashpoints that could very well lead to war, Mats. So I'll give you your final thoughts. We're going to wrap this episode up. It's been a very fascinating discussion. I know you're looking at the clock, so I'll give you the final word here. You've got the floor, Mats. Go ahead.
It's so many loose ends you could tie into, but perhaps if we look at Trump and we look at what Tulsi Gabbard said this last week, she said that she would like to bring in one of the Fox News presenters to present the news to Donald Trump every day, because apparently he doesn't read. Now, I'm not saying that to be an educated man or to make good decisions, you have to be well read. But you do have to be, as a president of the United States, able to accept the opinions of others and from there make decisions. Now, in the White House right now, we have a man who doesn't like words. He doesn't like people who he fancies as educated, which is it's just detrimental to the future of the world. And the fact that he's been voted into office, I think, says quite a lot about the state of the union as a whole. But we need those old statesmen back, the statesmen who have actually had a career of doing some serious thinking about where they want to go. Not waking up every morning and feeling they have to go somewhere, but actually having a plan and working it out and having peace as the operative goal. Right now, it's not peace as an operative goal. It's just a forever war as the operative goal, led by a man who prefers eating cheeseburgers and watching Fox News. The historians in 200 years' time, if they are still around, they're going to have a blast dissecting these last 25 years of human history.
As epic as the fall of Babylon, it's
Exactly
biblical. It's
biblical in the wrong sense.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Well, we've got a lot more to talk about. Let's pause and pick this conversation up in the future. Mats Nilsson, you can follow Mats on X, and do follow his X feed, folks, because his takes are worth reading on a daily basis. And we really appreciate your input on this very important discussion, Mats, obviously. And we need to keep having this discussion, and we need to be hoping that some of these good, intelligent points and ideas will make it through the information firewall to the people that need to hear them, who are formulating policy. That is my hope. I'm sure you feel the same way, and we appreciate your assistance to the world in that respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Mats Nilsson. You guys, this is a very important conversation, and this is the most important conversation, actually. We are in the very dangerous period in history right now, and I'm not exaggerating. I had a roundtable discussion last night with two people I respect a great deal. Ray McGovern, who is a longtime CIA veteran intelligence analyst, served many U.S. presidents, speaks many languages, understands many things, and also Colonel Larry Wilkerson. And the discussion was dead serious. The situation, the balls that are being juggled by Washington right now, they're not doing a very good job of keeping them in the air. And the risk is that they're going to drop everything. Why? Because it's very possible that the people around the President of the United States don't have the skill set, don't have the depth required, don't have the ability, are not capable of managing what is in front of them. And there's different reasons for that, but it's really unacceptable, because I can tell you, in the Carter administration, they had the skill set and the ability and the people. In the Reagan administration, they had it. George H.W. Bush, they had it. Even Bill Clinton had it. And I would even go so far as to say even the George Bush Jr. had it. And Obama had some of them, but others that weren't very good. And things kind of eroded from Bush to Obama. Then Trump 1.0, Biden is a disaster. And Trump 2.0 is turning out to be a bigger disaster than Joe Biden, believe it or not. That's what's at risk. Can he turn it around? Can he fix something that seems to be irreparable, partly by his own efforts or lack of? That's a big question. And, a lot of childish talk, a lot of tropes, a lot of rhetoric, a lot of propaganda. The Trump administration, Trump's looking like Nicolae Ceausescu at the moment, with all the sycophant and nepotism that's going on around Washington, the way the press is treated, exclusionary policies with media, dismissive remarks, lowbrow discussions, and behavior that is quite disgusting from a head of state or U.S. government. I'm not belittling all of the things that Donald Trump faced in terms of lawfare, Russiagate, all of that nonsense. And that really eroded the United States politically. But Trump's reaction to all that, I think, is equally as damaging. And I don't think he has smart people around him. I think there's a lot of grifters and opportunists surrounding the president, and they're not complimenting him. They're not compensating for his weaknesses. They're just adding more weakness to the equation, and more confusion and more chaos. And it's a very difficult situation, folks. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on it, obviously trying to talk to good people like we did today. Mats Nilsson, formidable legal historian and geopolitical analyst. We'll continue this conversation. This is the Midweek Wire. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We'll see you on Sunday and the Sunday Wire as scheduled. Hopefully this Sunday we'll have something interesting. We did last week. You can go to the archive there and see our interview with Karim Franceschi, who is a veteran of the fight against ISIS on the ground in Raqqa and Kobani in Syria. He had some interesting insights about Syria, of course. Great discussion. And again, if you like what you see and you like the sort of work that we're doing, support us. We need your help at 21st Century Wire. We have the Midweek Wire, the Sunday Wire, daily content, amazing reports, including today on the Greenland issue. We have a great global affairs department now, and you'll see the quality of content we're posting on a daily basis is quite something. And it's there for you. It's all accessible. So we need your help. Join, become a member if you can. Support us on a monthly basis, very small amount. We're going to do more. We're going to be adding more content. We're in the process of doing that, and we need your help to make that happen. So please support us, donate, subscribe, whatever you can do. We appreciate it. We appreciate it a great deal. That's all we have time for today, folks. And I want to leave you with something on the outro. And this is Peyote for President. We'll see you on Sunday.
Y no podría ser la excepción. El partido Fuerza, 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 Fuerza. Se vive hoy. Se vive esta manifestación desde el corazón y las entrañas de un pueblo. Por eso hoy queremos recibir a ese líder, a ese caballero.
You are the revolution that you've been waiting for. You are the revolution that you've been waiting for. You are the revolution that you've been waiting for.
You are the revolution. You are the revolution. You are the revolution. You are the revolution.
That you've been waiting for.
You are the revolution. You are the revolution. You are the revolution.
That you've been waiting for.
You are the revolution. Revolution.
When you're tired of being just a commodity, you are the revolution. And when gas lit into another war, stand strong because you are the revolution.
You are the revolution. You are the revolution. You are the revolution. You are the revolution.
That you've been waiting for.
You are the revolution. You are the revolution. You are the revolution.
They conspire against you, accuse you of terrorism, to steal your sovereignty. Hold fast, watch it collapse. Know that we still have the power. You are the revolution. They want to centralize, monopolize, control your thoughts. Breathe, go deep, go outside, put seeds in the ground. You are not alone.
time.